This spreadsheet filled with drop-down boxes allows us to choose the year, the make, the model, the class, the drive, transmission, cylinders, and the miles per gallon for both the city and the highway. The next drop-down box can be completely different. So let's see how we can create pretty much an infinite number of drop-down boxes both horizontally and vertically. Let's open up a new spreadsheet. First, we need some data. So from this full list here, I've actually got, 38,000 options here just as an example. So I'm going to copy this over to my new spreadsheet. That's a lot of data for Google Sheets, so it might take a while to paste. Because that's 38,000 rows, I'm going to delete all of this information over here just to cut down on the number of cells in the entire spreadsheet. Let's call this one full list. Open up a new tab and we'll call this one dropdowns. This is where we're going to be creating our dropdown lists. We'll select the headers from our full list, pop that into row 1. And again, let's delete all of this information and put a dropdown box into A2. And our criteria is going to be drop down from a range. We'll click this window button, go to full list, and we'll choose A2 to A. Click OK, done, back to drop downs, and let's select a year. Let's go with 1986. Now this right here is a number. We can tell because it's right justified. If we go back to our full list and select everything, go up to Format, Number, Plain Text. That changes everything into a text. And we'll do the same for this, making sure everything is a text. There we go, left justified automatically, meaning it's now text. So how can we create a new drop-down box where our first one is 1986? Well, let's open up a new tab and we'll call this one Dependent Dropdown 1. In A2, we're starting in A2 because in dropdowns we start in row 2. In A2, let's type equals filter. We'll go down to the full list and select column B. We'll put a comma, and our criteria is where A1 to A, or column A, is equal to dropdowns A2. Press enter, and there's the full list of makes from 1986. We don't want all of these repeats, so let's go up to the formula bar and add in a unique function to give us just unique values. And in this case, we want them to go horizontally. So let's type in a transpose. Back in our dropdowns menu, we'll go to B2 and type @dropdowns to give us our dropdown menus. Click on this down arrow and again change dropdown from a range. We'll click the window button, go to DD1 and select row 2. Click OK. Click back on dropdowns and now we have all of these cars from 1986. If we change this to 1984, then we have these cars, which look very similar, but we now have AM General, which didn't exist in 1986. Not from my list anyway. So let's see how we can apply this to row 3, row 4, row 5, and so on. Let's click on 1986. We'll go right down the bottom to this edit button. At the moment, in the apply to range, we've got dropdowns A2. Let's do A2 to A, let's say 20. Click done. Now we can select any other year from the list. If we try the same thing with our make, we'll click the edit button, change this to B2 to B20. Unfortunately, that won't work. Let's change the first one to 1984. And the Acura is not in this list. AM General is in this list, but if we look here, we have AM General and no Acura. So it's not taking the right information from 1988. If we change this one to 1988, there's the Acura, but no AM General. So this is not currently dynamically updating, but we can easily fix that. We're in column B, so let's select the right one, column B. And here in the range list, we've got these dollar signs. All we need to do is backspace those dollar signs. Click on done. And now let's choose Acura for 1988. Let's change this to 1984. And this time we get absolutely nothing in return. If we go back to dropdowns 1, the reason we have nothing is because there's nothing in row 3. So all we need to do is go to row 2, click and drag this handle down to as many rows as you selected for your dropdowns. In this case, 20. We now have a different list of cars for each of our rows. Back in our dropdowns, we might have Acura in 1988, but in 1984, we don't have the Acura, but we do have that AM General. If you're not a fan of seeing these NAs, then let's just put an IFNA right at the beginning. Copy and paste that down to get rid of them. Since we're only choosing 20 rows of dropdowns, let's go ahead and delete all of these rows down the bottom to keep it nice and tidy. We'll go back to our dropdowns, and we just need to do the exact same thing to fill in the model, class, drive, and so on. First, let's duplicate dropdown list 1. Duplicate, call this DD2. In A2, we need to change this formula a little bit. So it's no longer picking from B to B, which is in our full list, the make. We're now choosing the model. So our dropdown 2 will be our model. Column C. At the same time, you might also be thinking, well, let's just change this to B and B. Press enter, and we get the Integra, the Legend, the NSX, and so on. But the problem with this is in the dropdowns, we have the Acura. Now, the Acura appears 302 times within this full list. We've got the 1986 versions, which is just the Integra and the Legend. Then we've got the 1987, again, Integra and Legend. But if we jump all the way down to the 2017 Acuras, we've got all of these new makes which show up in this list. So we need to be looking for not just the make, but also the year. So back in our DD2, let's change this back to A, and A. As we started, we'll select all of this and paste it on the end, and now change them to B, B, and B. Press enter, and now we just get the Integra and the Legend, which are the makes from the 1988 Acuras. Copy this all the way down, and we now have our models based on our dropdowns. For column C, for our models, let's add a new rule. Change this to drop down from a range, and our range is going to be DD2, row 2. Click OK, change our dropdowns to C2 to C20. Click Done. But now let's go back into it, because we can see these $ have been automatically applied. Let's get rid of them and click on Done. Apply to all, and we get the Integra and the Legend. If we change this to 2017 Acura, we've got a lot more models available. Let's see if we can speed this up a bit. Step 1. Copy and paste the dropdowns from C2 over to our class. Step 2. Duplicate DD3. Step 3. In A2, we'll change this to D. Copy and paste the last part of the formula, change it to C, and dropdowns C2. Copy and paste that down. Now in our dropdowns, we'll edit this and change this to DD3. Change our apply to range to D2 to D20. Done. And we didn't need to remove the $ that would have been in here because we copied and pasted from the previous column. Copy, paste, duplicate. DD4. Change this one to E. Copy and paste the last part of the formula. Copy and paste down. Our drop downs, edit, E2 to E20, DD4. Front wheel drive, front wheel drive. Let's check out the 1984 Chevrolet, the G1020 van 2-wheel drive. And for the transmission, we should have multiple options. So again, let's copy and paste this over. And the reason we're duplicating the tab first before we change this is if we try to change this first, we'll get an error. So let's just cancel out of that, duplicate DD4, change it to DD5. F, copy, paste, E2, copy down. Back in our dropdowns, edit, F2 to F20, change this to DD5, click done, and we'll choose just this instance. There's our transmission for our Acura, and for our 1984 Chevrolet, we have 4 options. I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of these. And that's the dynamic dropdowns done. But before we jump away, we need to make sure that everything's working right. So let's go back to DD8. Now at the bottom, we should see everything from DD1 all the way up to DD8. If you don't, then these dropdowns just won't work. But in DD8, if we click on A2, we should be able to find columns A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. If you're missing any of them, then go back and fix them up. And once everything is working well, we can start to format our dropdowns tab. So in our dropdowns tab, let's just go to View, Show Grid Lines to get rid of those ugly grid lines, and we can start moving things around. So instead of having everything in column A, I'm just going to add a little buffer here, adding 2 columns to the left, and delete that. Let's add a buffer at the top. Add a little buffer to the right-hand side, and delete those dropdowns. And with everything formatted, let's go ahead and pop a border around this. And it doesn't take much to make everything look nice and tidy. Last thing, we don't want to see all of these dropdowns down the bottom. That's just formulas, so let's right-click on them and click Hide Sheets. The full list is still there if you want to investigate them, but if you don't want that shown either, go ahead and hide that sheet too. Now this system works as it is, but if you want to do any kind of sorting using the filter button up the top, then things might get a little bit messed up. At the same time, you might not want all of these drop-down lists, so if either of these limitations are a problem for you, make sure you check out this video here to see how we can create the same infinite dependent drop-downs using scripts.